The past 6 months have been extremely challenging for the automotive industry, with a dramatic fall in sales because of the unprecedented disruption to our lives. For once, the entire globe has been affected, not least Europe, which saw a 50% fall in automotive online traffic in just 30 days between March and April this year. Now, as economic activity returns, some governments are helping their car industry. We have seen an increase of 20% in traffic to electric vehicles in France and Germany. But there are other more fundamental shifts. The way people buy cars is changing, and mobile now account for a staggering 65% of all automotive digital activity. Digital showrooms are suddenly the focus of attention, and brands are flocking to establish a personalized video relationship with their customers. SOPHUS3 has a unique and independent view, which helps us to forecast the direction of the market, a reverse funnel if you like, which reveals how tomorrow's consumers will shop in digital. So the question for us all is, will we see a V-shaped recovery, an L-shaped recovery, or a W-shaped recovery? In this session, my colleagues and our special guest will use insight from our eDataXchange platform to provide answers to this question. Let's begin with a brief recap of the automotive year so far. A year in which COVID-19 has disrupted the sector not only economically, but in the whole way that it does business. At SOPHUS3, we follow 3 sets of data with particular interest to measure performance. Online traffic to car brand site, car brand marketing activities, and finally vehicle registration outcome. And this is what we saw in Q1 2020. Visits were down 11%, ad spend was down 22%, and registration down by 29%. In Q1, the market was clearly entering the downturn of its normal cycle. Site traffic, brand spend, and vehicle registration were all down across the big 5 European markets. Car manufacturers were fretting about the impact of EU emissions penalties and the threats of large fines. COVID-19 only moved front and center at the end of the quarter as it began to rage out of control. Lockdowns were implemented across each market beginning of mid-March, and in Q2, as we know, things fell off a cliff. Visits were down 24%, ad spend down by 59%, and car registration down by 55%. The automotive sector initially saw traffic tumble in line with airlines and travel companies as consumers focus on more immediate concerns like hunting online for groceries and toilet paper. Across Europe, the car industry effectively shut up shop. Advertising was pulled as outlets closed, and vehicle registration consequently fell a disastrous and unprecedented -55%. Q3, at least the first 2 months for which we have data, offers some signs of recovery. Visits were up by 5%, ad spend was still down by 10%, but registration started to pick up. Traffic to car websites showed positive year-on-year growth and adverts reappeared. Car sales were down only 7%. Also, with many deliveries rolled out from Q2, it's hard to assess the true health of the car market at this point. And seasonality too did not follow usual patterns, as staycation took precedence over foreign holidays, and the lower traffic volume associated with summer was spread more evenly across late July and August. As you can see from this graph, France and Spain were the most impacted market. But within the overall picture, there were clear winners and losers. Car brands weathered the crisis with very different outcomes. 5 brands in the big 5 saw their combined sales in July and August increase by more than 10% over the previous year. At the other end of the league table were 5 brands whose sales were down more than 20%. So what accounts for the difference in fortune? Analysis of the data can perhaps help us clarify the constituents of success. The first of these was the retention of online engagement. Of the top 10 brands in terms of registration performance in Q3, 9 of them all retained or grew traffic above the sector average during Q2. At the other end, more than half saw website traffic fall beyond the average. The spend data for the period gives a more mixed message. 6 of the top 10 brands continued to advertise at a level greater than the sector average during Q2, but so too did 5 of the brands that fell into the bottom 10 in terms of Q3 sales outcome. Clearly, it was not business as usual. Spend did not necessarily lead to increased engagements or sales. As it being repeatedly stated, but then ignored in practical terms, this is a unique situation. The problem is medical, not economic, and the solution therefore cannot be lifted from the playbook from previous recession or downturns. The winners in this situation were the ones that were prepared for or quickly adapted to the unprecedented constraint the pandemic imposed, chiefly in the form of digital tools and workarounds to overcome the enforced closure of their retail network. So, of the top 10 winners, 8 brands offered live chat or video live chat with a product genius, replicating the sales possibility denied by showroom closures. At the other end of the table, only 2 out of 10 offered some kind of live chat or engagement tool facilities. Moreover, half of the winners offered even more, a complete end-to-end online purchase facility whereby a sale can be negotiated and fulfilled using a suite of digital tools, including vehicle valuation, provision of finance, contract completion, and delivery logistics. Only one of the worst performing brands offered such a facility. In the unique situation that COVID-19 has presented, the differentiator has been the capability to respond to consumers, interact with them, and seamlessly move towards a transactional conclusion with using digital tools and bridges.
So we've heard from Scott about the extreme volatility in the market in the first 6 months of the year. But what's it like to be at the sharp end of that? To be running digital for one of these big corporates who struggle to adapt to market conditions at the best of times? Right now it was very urgent. We spoke to Marcus Casey, the head of digital and e-commerce at BMW Group, to find out what things he accelerated and how he overcame internal barriers to make change happen.
So we have real, like in the airline business, tailwind that we got, because I remember in the board that I was in a board meeting in January, it was more like, okay, how do we do it and what do we do and so forth. And then in March, it was like, I got a call from our CEO basically, it just when are we going to do it? When are we going to accelerate that change? Specifically regarding, the whole purchase funnel for cars, and how do we boost our digital presence there even more? Yes, and I mean, in crisis, normally budgets are cut and resources are, put together more or have to be reduced. But in our case, we actually got additional funding in order to boost the program. We named it Rapid Response too, which is a nice way of, it's a kind of established itself as a brand name in the company, which is good. We definitely got a big boost in what we always wanted to do anyhow, but there was a bit, traditional sales areas, a bit of a not reluctance, but doubt, how does that work with the dealers? And in a wholesale model, it's much more difficult to set up this journey in a digital way than, let's say, where I came from, in my previous job, which was an agency model, where it was very easy to set up digital sales. Let's think about how long have people been buying online. I think I just recently saw on my Amazon account that now they tell you how long you've been a member, just like American Express, and on mine it said 2000. So it's a long time ago, and so also in industries like ours, that trend has been going on for a long time, but it always ended abruptly once you decided this is the car I'm interested in. Then you are catapulted more into the 90s, where there's a form and then you fill out the form, and then, you know, with good dealers you do get a follow-up quite quickly. But there's been that, it's just been in the inquiry phase where we were very much present. Yeah, a great question, and something we ask ourselves every day, you know, because even, I mean, you can see also the ratio between configured cars and sold cars there is a big discrepancy. So, I mean, if you configure a car, if you personalize your car, you're more in the funnel of purchasing one. But I think it's just that, you know, companies like ours, with such an enormous brand recognition, brand name, people in Asia, if you wear a Louis Vuitton hat or a BMW cap, it's the same. I mean, that's the appeal of the brand. I just had a discussion with someone who is in our event team, and, you know, you do events in the mountains, you do sailing events, you know, things like that, classical. I mean, now we're very, you know, we just announced that we're getting big into esports, which is, I think, a big area, which obviously I like a lot because it has that affinity towards digital already, and maybe you can connect much better the initiatives you do. Or if, you know, Black Widow as a movie coming out and supporting things like that. So how do you connect those dots more? I mean, that's the fun thing about digital, that it's more measurable. I think the tools are all there in order to really know your customers quite well, even anonymously if they're not logged in. I think it's more difficult when you go outside of your own space. But again, I mean, with the technologies out there, I think a lot can be done. I always tell my people, let's not reinvent the wheel. If others have done a good job at certain things, just copy it, you know? I mean, obviously you don't know all the proprietary information and all the details, but I think there's many providers out there who will help you to get there. So I would say we're on the path, but definitely not there yet. And that's I think the thing in car companies too. We have a lot of engineers, and they're so proud of what they do. So, I mean, although there's a lot of benchmarking being done, which impressed me immensely when I joined the company, but sometimes then there's that pride factor. What I find interesting is that our website was very much positioned more as an information and marketing platform. And I'm not even sure how well we did in the informational part sometimes, because coming from marketing, you often showed beautiful pictures and so forth. You know, your showroom, your virtual showroom is more a beautiful brochure. And what we learned from the data and from feedback and everything, that customers want much more hard facts also. They want to compare, they want to know if that car fits into their garage. So we're really changing the narrative there and becoming much more to the point. You know, also, how do we integrate maybe other sources? Because, I mean, there's so many sources out there, YouTube videos, the magazine you just showed me, you know, how do we get that together? So I think that's one thing that's really changed. And then I think what has fundamentally changed is now to continue that journey and say, not only am I interested in a car, but I can finish the entire process online if I want to. And I think that's one of the fundamental ones. And what we've also seen, and never forget, I mean, it's all about the car, but I mean, also for people who want to buy any accessories, or what we have done is over-the-air products now. So I buy a stock car, but then I want to add a navigation system, or I want to add a high beam assistant. So things like that now you can buy over the air. So you can add that to your car, which is good, because then, you know, in the past it was very difficult. You had to go to the dealer, you had to have it upgraded. You know, if you missed something at the point of order, it basically was done. I do believe that almost everything, even in a wholesale setup, is in place that you could buy your car from your couch. Because I mean, let's think. I mean, I was lucky enough to put a little bit of stock into a Doku sign or something. So you have those providers out there that do all the e-signature part virtually. So, and I mean, you trade in, and you can do that all. Issue is, in a wholesale model, you always have that pricing part, because I mean, you'll never have that final price, or you could get close to it, but you don't have, price is determined by the dealer, and that makes it a bit more complicated. But I think that definitely is possible in the road down the route. I mean, you just basically extend it module by module. That's, you can go to down payment, but you can do much more. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel myself as someone who's transforming our organization. Again, I want to be humble. I'm not the only one, but from a product company to a service company. And I mean, this is just one element of it, but it's a big one, and it touches all parts of the organization. And that's something that I thought was interesting too, because if you're a product company, you say, here's my product, I roll it out, and then it just sells. And that's something we really made aware. It's not about having a chart with all these nice green hooks, we did it. It's about, we did it, and is it working? And what are we doing to optimize it? And who's doing what in the process? I personally think that what will have changed is that that most of the sales will be digitally infused. I mean, let's be honest, you can also create a much more digital experience at the dealer if you want to. I think you will always also have retail. I mean, let's look at Apple. I mean, what's the reason they still have their shops? You could say maybe they wouldn't need them, but it's part of the brand experience. And I think that will always be there, or luxury goods. I mean, although they mostly sell retail. And so you will have that mixture. I think it's much more a seamless experience that you'll have. And I do think that you will have probably 30-40% of your sales online.
Some fascinating insights there from Marcus, not least the point he made about streamlining the consumer experience on the OEM side to make it more efficient. As an ex-journalist myself, I like the idea of leaving the media content to the experts, to the journalists, the road testers, who describe the product so well and allow the consumer to make the right decision. We now turn our attention to electric vehicles, which of course is an area where BMW have been very active themselves in the last few years, but also many other manufacturers, and a number that is increasing. And in fact, going into this year, the new launches from people like Volkswagen, Tesla, Mini and Honda have resulted in a big increase in a consumer attention on EVs. And in fact, they're over-indexing against their conventionally powered counterparts by up to 3-1. That was a trend that continued into lockdown, and there were various hypotheses as to why that might be. People stuck at home thinking more about their environment, but also I think the fact that EVs were becoming more relevant to people. The ranges are extending, they're becoming cheaper in some instances, and of course there's more consumer choice. And by the end of lockdown, 2 countries introduced very aggressive consumer incentives to consider EVs, in Germany and France, and we saw an instant increase in consumer traffic and interest that reflected the new affordability of those types of car. But it wasn't just Germany and France. In fact, the UK and Italy also saw a sustained increase in interest for EVs. We produce the SOPHUS3 EV Index, which is a measure of how ready a country is for EV transition. And the UK performed very strongly in Q2. And in particular, the consumer interest element of the index increased by 30%, which gave the UK an overall score of 38 out of 100. But bear in mind, 100 would represent parity with non-EVs. So it shows just how far the UK and other European countries still has to go before they reach an equal footing with EVs. The transition will only be truly cemented when there is more choice. And of course there are SUV versions of EVs as we're starting to see with some of the manufacturers and notably VW this year. Now, before we leave you, we want to talk about retail, which has undergone a transformation in 6 months, both positive and negative. To do that, we want to look at the US, which is a retail hub like no other. It's the second biggest car market in the world, and of course has a very streamlined retail experience for consumers who are able to pick up cars on the day and do the paperwork at the desk. We know a true expert in US retail, and that's Russ Hill. He led Audi's US sales when they were growing exponentially and now advises retail groups on best practice in retail and, of course, digital. He's going to share some fascinating insights with us, which we think are very relevant to the UK and European markets.
And just for a perspective, I mean, there's 18,000 rooftops in the United States. And so you can imagine that the amount of adaptation that has had to take place has varied dramatically from quite frankly, very, very weak in terms of digital space to people that are highly progressive and that are in fact leading the way. So it's been a incredible. COVID has been a catalyst in the United States. Particularly if you want to do, as I like to refer to, is you want to play offense and defense. A lot of the change that took place in the earliest time of COVID were immediately defensive in nature. How do I save costs? How do I increase productivity? How do I keep my people safe? How do I keep my customers safe? Very, very defensive moves. And then all of a sudden, everybody realized, oh my God, I've got this incredible opportunity for a paradigm shift. I've got the opportunity to actually both lower my operating expenses and increase my productivity by just doing things differently. And that light bulb effect went on at a varying intensity and in varying locations all across the United States. What didn't go down was web traffic. Web traffic exploded, during the shutdown. And when you looked at it from a brand to brand basis, from a model to model basis, the amount of activity that we had, you could see change dramatically. Normally in the car business, there are certain day parts where web traffic spikes, and your BDCs have got to be extremely well staffed and ready. That type of presence then now moved away from the early hours of coming to work and lunchtime into a full day's worth of activities. The same desire to be interactive, to do as you and I are doing right now, see each other, see facial expressions, catch the eyes, that's human and that's never going to go away. Okay, so the total digital experience, let's call it this, the Amazonian retail experience, where you are clicking and buying, okay, is in our industry at least, is not anything that we're seeing anytime soon. Even though the customers are spending a great deal of time doing their research, they still want what we're calling confirmation. And as soon as there's any disconnect between what they've seen online and what they begin to experience as they're getting closer to the actual experience, any disconnect, that's where people are saying bye-bye. The Pew Research released a recent report that blew my mind. The headline states, and I'll read it, a majority of young adults in the US live with their parents for the first time since the Great Depression. Now think of that. I'm telling you, if this cycle works the way that it did before, we're in for an explosion of economic activity as in a very, very short term, because those people are going to form family units. They are going to go out on their own, and they are going to spend a lot of money to do so. The first thing that we are advising our retail clients on is to eliminate waste. One of the biggest things that we have seen, and we knew it going in because we were teaching it, we were training it, we were trying to eliminate waste all. And waste to me was absolutely horrid. Lead conversion rates, okay? Absolutely, this didn't make any difference whether it was a vehicle sales or whether it was a service lane sale or a service appointment. We saw a huge opportunity to increase the connect rate with which retailers would in fact connect with people who inquired to do business with them. The failure rate in terms of answering telephone calls or answering them properly was a big leaky bucket. One dealer called me up from California and said, look, I think that I've got this thing knocked. I said, what is it, Don? He said, yeah, I think that what I want to do here now is I know that I'm only going to sell about 70-75% of the business that I'm supposed to sell, but I want to do it with 50% of my employee cost, okay, so that I make more money than I would have otherwise. And quite frankly, he had cracked the code. First of all, there's a couple of different sets of digital devices that are available. One actually helps you with becoming very, very accurate in terms of market pricing. When you get to the point in time where you have the ability to forecast demand, you know, whether it's through an inventory acceleration program or whether it's through a situation where you're getting accurate, very accurate market appraisals for your trades. Those are the areas, quite frankly, that help you to price to the market much better than the 30-year-old used car manager that knows what Porsches are worth in Birmingham, Michigan. The old road to the sale is not dead. Okay, it's just reprioritized. Okay, if we began to go back and look at how I was trained when I was, you know, put in the car business, of a road to the sale that starts with prospecting and ends with delivery follow-up, that was a linear process. Our customers and our brains, we finally realized our brains do not think in a linear fashion. Okay, we might be at the introductory phase of something, but our brains are already looking 3 steps beyond. And what we have now is a spectrum of service, where on one end of that spectrum, you have the customer that doesn't want anybody to touch them and doesn't want to talk to them. I want to do everything online. I want the Amazonian model. On the other end of that spectrum, that same wealthy customer will desire to have personal service because they have so much choice available to them now. And so it's a spectrum, and training the dealer and setting the dealers up so that they can do that spectrum with fewer sales, you know, face-to-face salespeople in a more advanced and user-friendly information tool is the key. What's going to make all this work? What's going to make all this work are going to be highly talented, capable people. Very few of the people who are at retail, it's a bad word to use, very few, but let's put it, a significant number, really are clumsy with digitization. They really are. And they need to become familiar with it. They need to become a good user. Okay, so that they can move through the data and the information that the customer really wants at the speed at which the customer wants to work, because that's the determining factor. The average length of time that it took to buy a car on a weekend was 6 hours. 6 hours from door front to drive away, 6 hours, okay? whoa. And when you began to look at the why of that, it was just wasting the customer's time. Now what we know, based upon what we're seeing, is customers who come to that store want to be in and out and driving their car in less than 1 hour, because they've already gone through a selection process. They know whether you've got it or you don't. So you've got to go into what we're calling confirmational selling. Confirm to the customers what they want. Find out really what they know, and you can accelerate the process so much. So the speed to sale thing is going to increase dramatically. And think of what that's going to do to the human dynamics at a dealership. You're going to need less people. You're going to need less space. All those things, these things that cost a lot of money, are things that we're going to change the nature of retail by just embracing new technology.
Very interesting feedback from Russ Hill. I really like how he spoke about the opportunities this crisis is giving us to review our business model and how demographic might be impacted in the long term. I hope you have found this digital update insightful. In the current context, we are not able to host our regular face-to-face conferences, but we want to make sure that we're able to keep you up to date with the latest trend in the automotive digital space. A big thank you to the SOPHUS3 team for this homemade video, and looking forward to catching up with you in the near future. If you have any question or suggestion, please get in touch, and in the meantime, take care.
Fasten your seatbelts. Disruption is on its way.